People that have woken up in bed with a stranger. What's your story? When I was 11, I went to my friend's place for a horror movie sleepover night. I woke up with a 4-year-old boy who turned out to be her little brother, clinging to all my blankets in fear. He had eavesdropped on our sleepover after pretending to go to bed early and was now convinced it all would end him in his sleep. Their mom made us all hot chocolate and then he slept in her bed all night. Something I would probably have believed when I was a kid. Story 2. I was around 19 years old and at a weekend festival where most people camped out in tents. I got hammered and blacked out on Saturday and woke up in an air mattress in somebody else's tent. I sat up to get my bearings at some point in the morning and the couple was also in the tent, but not laying in the air mattress. The guy sat up right after me and said, "Buddy, I don't know who you are, but you better get the heck out of here." I didn't stick around to ask any questions. Story 3. Never really woke up with a stranger, but I did wake up on a stranger's couch once. Looked around and sat up to see a woman staring at me. I startled and realized I had no idea who this woman was. Then I realized I was only in my garments. So I half covered up and she asked who I was. I said my name and asked where Jill was, the girl I thought I went to see. She looked confused for a second before bursting out laughing. Turns out Jill's neighbor didn't lock her door and I was obviously very intoxicated. I ended up making a sandwich and drinking half a carton of orange juice before hitting the couch. Thank God she was so nice. Skylar, if you're reading this, thank you for not calling the cops. Thank you, indeed. Story 4. Not me, but a neighbor was a member of a fraternity and they all went downtown and got completely intoxicated. He doesn't remember how he got separated from his buddies, but woke up in a very soft bed, not knowing where he was. He saw a large, fluffy flowered bathrobe in the back of the door and put it on. He heard some voices and walked toward them. He walked into the dining room and there was an all-black family smiling in relief at him. My neighbor was a southern white guy. They were all eating breakfast and the father pulled out a chair right beside him and made him a heaping plate of scrambled eggs, grits, toast, and bacon. My neighbor had left the bar in an intoxicated state and had come upon their car and passed out in their back seat. Thankfully, all ended up okay. He kept in touch with that family for a long time afterwards. What a nice family. Story 5. Probably not what you imagined. As a kid, I would sleepwalk at night. In the morning, I would have no recollection of what happened. I spent the night at a friend's house when I was about 10, and the family had a fire going in the fireplace in their living room. My friend's mom decided to sleep on the couch to make sure the fire went out, and the dad went to sleep in the parents' bedroom. Due to the door to their bedroom always being closed, I had never been inside, which was very, very disorienting the next morning when I awoke in said bedroom, as the dad was just waking up and getting out of his bed. He had assumed during the night I was his son and didn't question anything when I slipped into bed with him. Kudos to Dad for not making it any more awkward than it already was. And that's the story of how I awoke next to my friend's dad. That is very awkward. Story 6. Not as raunchy as some of the stories, but a friend of mine in college woke up in some random girl's bed that she didn't know. She was so intoxicated that she thought it was her dorm room. And the door was open, so she got into bed and slept. When she woke up, there was a note next to her that said something like, "Hey, I don't know who you are, but you were really asleep last night. Don't worry, it's cool if you crash here. I was going to spend the night at my boyfriend's. Just please make sure you close the door when you leave. P.S. I left you a glass of water in the nightstand." Apparently, that girl came back to her room and found my friend passed out in her bed. She decided to be really nice and let her sleep it off. That's some next-level girl code. Story 7. Lol. Oh god. Wish this hasn't happened as often as it has. As a tiny female, I'm lucky to be alive. One specifically stands out. I was out drinking with my dad. He was in town visiting, uncle and my brothers. Across from our table are these two guys visiting from Tennessee. At some point, my uncle starts chatting with them and invites them to join our table. One is very Matthew McConaughey-like. So naturally, I'm trying to be subtly flirtatious. I drank a lot that night to the point that I'm pretty spotty in leaving the bar, or even the fact that my family just let me leave with these two random guys. I woke up in their hotel room. Turns out it was 7 guys sharing the room, and had the entire bed to myself. They even put the comforter over me while a couple had the other bed and the rest slept on the floor. One of the dudes even went and got breakfast for us all, including me. They tried to convince me to go to their Fish concert that they were in town for, but they had to work. That went more wholesome than I thought it would. Story 8. Not a bed, but kind of an abandoned trailer in the middle of the desert. Found shelter, slept in it, and woke up. There was another person in there. They didn't know I was in there either. When I stood up and looked around, they were staring at me all wide-eyed and clearly freaked out. I didn't know what to do, and we just looked at each other for a little bit. I don't know what to say, so I offered her some corn nuts. We both laughed at that, and then we shortly left without asking any questions. That's the closest I ever got to a one-night stand. That's just sad, man. Story 9. I used to date this really crappy guy. We lived together for 5 years, and in that time, some hella dicey crap happened. but this one makes the top 5. It was a Sunday night, around 2 a.m. I was asleep in bed when I'm woken by the feeling of someone staring at me. Assuming it's my then boyfriend, I tell him I'm trying to sleep and don't want to have intimacy. Then I hear a laugh I'd never heard before. I fly out of bed, and there's this guy sitting on the edge of my bed laughing his bum off. I ask who he is. He says, "No, I'm Andrew, boyfriend's buddy." Then he tells me how my ex told him I was a prude and would be mad if he came in our bed, but he didn't believe my ex because boyfriend was so cool. Why would he date a boring girl? Then he asked if I wanted some cola. I walked out and told my ex to get rid of him and let me sleep since I worked in the morning. His reply, "Well, now that you're up, can you take us to McDonald's?" Well, did you take them to McDonald's? Story 10. This has happened to me multiple times because I black out really easily, but the craziest time goes like this. I was 21 and had just gotten into a fight with my girlfriend in front of her whole family at their Christmas party. We were both intoxicated, and we broke up for the 4th and final time that week. I stormed out without my house keys, wallet, or phone. I drank an entire liter to myself at that point. I walked to the local bar about 2 miles away and realized I didn't have any money, but I did remember my cigarettes, which I used to trade for more shots. The next morning, I was in bed with a couple twice my age, over 40 miles away from my apartment. They said, "Nothing happened. You just cried a lot and said you didn't have a place to go, so we took you in and cuddled." The boyfriend drove me to work and I moved out of state the next week. That is extremely shady. Story 11. Not sure if this counts, but I woke up under an SUV while tailgating at a D1 college with my pants around my knees. Game had already begun, and as I climbed out from underneath, I got loud cheers. "Oh, he's awake!" from people I didn't know that were watching the game on TV outside the stadium. Turns out I was making out with one of their friends underneath the SUV after stumbling up and being really friendly. Passed out mid-fooling around, so she went into the game. When I was awkwardly standing there after getting the rundown, they offered me a beer, and I just said, "Yeah, I think I'm gonna go home," and began the 3-mile trek back to my house. Story 12. I was in college, staying near campus, and decided to go to a frat party. I decided to walk home before the liquor kicked in too much. By the time I got home, I was blacking out. I barely made it. Got to my bed and passed out. Didn't even take my shoes off. Lol. I woke up off and on throughout the night, feeling some person next to me. I figured it was a girl I had been dating. She'd come over if she got scared at night or some to sleep at my place. I never thought much of it. She cuddled me that night and it felt amazing. Guys love being the little spoon sometimes. The sun woke me up and I decided to go whiz. I remember having to step over her to get out of bed, losing my balance because I was still intoxicated. I go whiz, come back, and notice this is not the girl I'm dating. Also, she's in garments. I then notice I only have garments on. My clothes are folded on my computer chair next to a half-eaten grilled cheese. I immediately go to my roommate's room to ask who the heck she is. He's in bed with his girl. I woke him up and he said the girl claimed she knew me. I was afraid. I go back to the living area until she wakes up. Apparently, she didn't have a ride home, and since she stayed far, I offered her a place to crash. She helped me walk home, unlocked the door for me because I was out of it, and folded my clothes. Then she made me grilled cheese because I was begging for one. I ate half of it and laid down. Initially, she was on the couch, but said I was calling to her loudly like a banshee. Lol. She cuddled me until I fell asleep, then she fell asleep. Lol. I was embarrassed and thankful. She took care of me. I took her home, we laughed about it, we stayed friends for a long time. Hung out more than a few times. We were never more than friends because I was already dating someone. Sometimes I wonder if she was the one for me. I don't know how we lost touch. I don't even like grilled cheese. Who doesn't like grilled cheese? Story 13. I've done that a lot. Most recently, just a couple days ago, I tend to ask why we're not in clothes and where my clothes are. My wife says I will discreetly paw around for my sidearm, despite not having carried a work-related sidearm for years. It usually feels pretty cool. Like, oh, I'm in bed with an attractive person. That's gotta be good. There's also often a little concern that I'm in this state and in bed where that might not be appropriate. This is all caused by postictal amnesia, temporary memory loss after a seizure. I did have this happen a long time back, in the way I guess OP meant. After a party, I awoke with a very small, very effeminate, very good-looking man in bed with me. I was straight, which made it even more odd. I recalled seeing him the night before, but we hadn't spoken. I was live-in security for the party host and had to get up to take care of a couple things, so I quietly crapped out. When I returned, he was still snoring away, so I sat at my desk and read. When he woke up, he explained that after the party had wound down and just a few people were awake talking, one of the other guests started becoming verbally hostile to him, saying homophobic things, insinuating threats and such. Everyone was asleep and he was afraid to leave but didn't feel safe anywhere there. I had my own room and he knew I was straight but not a homophobe. My employer or host was super gay, so he knew he'd be safe with me. He tried to wake me up but said I just mumbled and went back to sleep. I was pretty mad he had been mistreated and embarrassed I had not awoken. I reassured him that it was fine and brought him with me to staff breakfast. The other staff giggled and whispered, thinking we'd fooled around, and I did not deny it because how could I do that without making him feel undesirable? I treated him like a king, bringing him his food and coffee, introducing him to the staff as a trusted friend, and letting him pick which of my boss's cars to get driven home in by my boss's driver. He chose the Porsche. The guy who mistreated him was ushered into a private room by a couple of us. At the next party he attended, my boss threw like 3 a week, and we explained if he ever made the little sissy guy uncomfortable again, we'd screw his world up, and he was escorted off the property and told never to return. I felt flattered that the little guy trusted me, and it strikes my ego that people thought I'd managed to fool with him as he was a very classy, attractive man, outside my league, like a small Pierce Brosnan. Story 14. After my father's passing, his sisters asked my family to spend a summer weekend with them at a beach resort town. It ended up being the vacation from hell for many reasons, but this is the part that fits the prompt. The aunts didn't tell us why they were bringing their extended families, so we had 13 people crammed into a 1-bedroom condo. Most of us slept on the living room floor, which was also the dining room and kitchen. On Saturday night, my teenage cousin stayed out late while the rest of us returned to the condo and went to sleep. The next morning, we woke up to find a 14th person in the condo, a guy in his late teens to early 20s. My teen cousin explained that she'd met him while partying and he didn't have a place to stay, so she let him crash with us. She let a complete stranger into the room where her grandmother, mother, sister, aunts, and cousins, 2 of whom were children, were sleeping. Her side of the family shrugged it off, but my side was livid. We've never spent a vacation with them again. Story 15. I blacked out, woke up in the toilet. I go to flush the toilet. The handle isn't where it should be. I look around. This is not my apartment. My phone and clothes were on the floor, but my phone was out. I'd literally just moved to this town the day before. I didn't even know my new address, so without a phone, I was stuck in this apartment. I left the bathroom, looked in the living room, and found 4 girls passed out all along the couches. Didn't know any of them. What the hell did I get myself into last night? I go open the closest bedroom door. Don't know that girl either. From what I remember, it was the first Friday of a new internship, and all the interns went out drinking. I open up the final door, and I see this girl that I recognize from the internship. It seemed like she was into me this week, and I remember her being involved with many shots. I wasn't exactly keen on being involved with the girl, but considering how intoxicated I was, I wouldn't put it past myself doing something like this. I decided that I'm far too intoxicated to make any other move right now. I climb into bed with her and hope that I made the right call. Morning came and she seemed cool with everything, so I sighed with relief and asked her for a charger and a ride home. Story 16. I was at a bar in Wilmington and I got crazy intoxicated. I was hanging out with some college kids because my buddy I was there with got some, so I was on my own and bored. We did a ghost tour, saw some sights, and of course, a few bar crawls. I woke up in my bed in my hotel room with my buddy's one-nighter. Apparently, she had showered and crashed into the bed after they were done and hadn't bothered to move. We woke up spooning. Took me a good hour of panic the next morning before I realized that I had not in fact partaken in the leftover gravy stirring. Story 17. My family owns a big farm in Queensland, Australia, and it's mostly untouched bushland, but we lease the area out to a cattle producer. Since we have breeding land, we have a lot of calves every couple of years, and there's a feral dog population that hangs around trying to pick off the calves. So I go around every few weeks or so and do a several-day hunting trip just walking around. I was in the middle of a drought, so I couldn't light a fire, and I just slept in a sleeping bag under a tree, in an area I knew pretty well. It was a randomly cold night in summer, so I was happy to get rugged up. I woke up in the morning with my left leg feeling really tight, and I tried to shimmy my pants down in the sleeping bag because I thought they were just tangled up a bit. I felt something odd, so I unzipped the sleeping bag, and there was a red-bellied black snake wrapped around my leg, having a good snooze. I was so tired I wasn't even freaking out. I just tapped it awake and said, "Hey mate, can you leave?" And I released my leg and just buggered off. Should have been way more scared at the time, but I was exhausted from the day before. Didn't know you were chill like that. Story 18. I took a year off from school and was working in Shanghai. I went through a bad period, and for about 2 weeks, I was waking up in a different apartment with a different girl each night. We went to karaoke one night with a big group, and it just snowballed from there. I only remember flashes like riding in a taxi with a girl and then going into her place. No idea what her name was or who she was. I remember stumbling alone in the street to the subway at like 1 a.m., trying to beat them closing and failing. No idea how I got home that night. Honestly, it was incredibly eye-opening afterwards, and I realized how dangerous it was. I still don't remember a lot of that time frame, and I'm not sure I was sober more than a minute during it. Since then, I completely stopped drinking and got my life together. I don't recommend anyone do stuff like that, but it really helped me turn my life around. I have a good career and family now, but I always worry about falling back down that hole. Story 19. I drank a lot and did substances, so I barely remembered the night before. I woke up in a bed. There was another guy in the bed. I presumed he was in the same state as me, too. They just got up and got dressed and left. The guy didn't even get up. I don't want to wake him up. I was extremely confused and just figured that I fooled around with a guy. I'd never been into men and never done anything with a guy. I was honestly freaked out. 3 days later, I get a call, and it's apparently the guy saying I left my headphones there and that he wanted to know I got home okay. He said I dropped them on the ground when I took my clothes off in the middle of the night. I was like, what do you mean, the middle of the night? He apparently offered me a place to sleep because I was too intoxicated to get on the subway and I was fully clothed, but sometime in the middle of the night I got up and drank 2 shots of liquor and then danced in his room and asked that he record me dancing, then passed out in the bed. I became friends with him and he sent me the video of me dancing in his room. And I still have that video today. Story 20. My roommate had a party. I woke up in the morning and there was a girl who had intoxicatedly snuck into my bed and fallen asleep. We woke up at pretty much the same time in the early AM, both very confused. We talked for a minute and she insisted on taking a bathroom break, borrowing some pajamas, and snuggling back to sleep for a while. It somehow just felt like the natural thing to do. We ended up dating for a while, and the joke was that we had slept together before we met. If you don't want to wake up in a stranger's bed, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 21. My story isn't exactly what this question seeks, but it's close. In the college dorm, sometimes my roommate and I would come in late. Sometimes we forgot to lock the door. Well, one night, I woke in the dark to a man reaching under my covers and begging to climb into bed with me. My response, "What the heck are you doing?" "This is my bed." "Dude, no, it's not." "Dude, it's my bed." Tries to get in again, and I push his stumbly self mid-room. I wake up my roommate and we get him outside our door and lock it, both wide awake. Scratching and knocks to the handle, wobbling continued for what felt like an eternity. Yet we didn't learn our lesson. Later on, months later, I woke up at like 6 a.m. to my roommate. He began, "Hey man, someone's in my bed." I spent the night late in the room with a friend who didn't leave until 3 a.m. and my half-awake mind suspected it was him. My response, "That's probably just name. Sorry about that." Then opened my eyes. My roommate persisted. "Dude, he's not wearing anything but garments and isn't name." Eventually, I took a look and sure enough, an intoxicated guy came into a room while my roommate went to the bathroom and passed out in his bed. Story 22. I was going through a pretty nasty divorce. The last thing I recall was drinking heavily with a buddy of mine. I have some vague recollections of going outside the bar and some woman basically grabbing me and pulling me inside a cab. I came to, and it was obvious we had intense intimacy earlier that night. She was being handsy with me, wanting round two. Kind of crossed my mind that were their genders reversed, this would have 100% been mistreatment. But I was still intoxicated and just went at it again. Then tried to find my clothes, some of which had been shredded. Called the cab. She told me she was married and hadn't led anything like that in years. I felt terrible. I went outside, jumped in the cab, and found out where I was. A solid hour plus. $100+ fare from my house. I told the cabbie what happened, and he laughed uncontrollably at me and joked the whole way. I was so intoxicated, it wasn't until I got home that I realized I didn't have my coat, and with it, my house keys. I decided if it was at the woman's house, I was just getting a new coat and keys, so I grabbed the spare and let myself in. My soon-to-be ex-wife had already moved out. I went back to the bar the next day, found my coat and keys, and closed my tab. I got tested a few weeks later and spent the next few months hoping to goodness I didn't tell her where I lived and her husband didn't show up with a firearm. All in all, would not recommend. That convinced me that self-medicating with alcohol was not the way to get through the rough times I was having and that I needed to get my act together. Story 23. I'm 18. I head to a rave in the city with some people I don't know that well, but they're good guys. My tolerance for drink was pretty low and the booze was extremely cheap, so I ended up getting hammered pretty early. This is the only time in my life where I've blacked out. I vaguely remember getting on a bus, ending up at the end of the bus route, then I remember being home. No clue how I got home safe. After a couple of hours of sleep, I woke up needing the toilet. Pretty normal. Something feels wrong, though. I look to my left and see a woman sleeping beside me. It's dark, but I can tell she's older than me, which only made things more confusing. My mind is racing with explanations. Did I manage to bring a girl home when I was blacked out? Am I tripping out? Who knows? I lie back down, too nervous to wake her up, and ask. It feels like hours pass until my older brother pops his head in my bedroom, sees the girl, and asks me who she is. I tell him I have no idea. He chuckles to himself and explains the situation to me. She came over and stayed the night with him, got up to use the toilet in the night, mistakenly walked into my room, and went back to sleep. My door and my brother's are next to each other. Easy mistake. He wakes her up, covers her, and then they leave the room. She just about went out of embarrassment and never came over again. I decided to drink more responsibly to ensure no more spooky blackouts. Story 24. When I was around 10, I was on a flight from mainland US to Hawaii. On my way back to my military family home after visiting some relatives, my mother and her husband had ended their vacation earlier than me, so I could spend more time with my father and grandmother. So at that point, I was flying unattended. Airport staff and steward or stewardesses were keeping watch over me, obviously. I was in the middle of the several-hour-long flight, probably way after midnight, and I woke up in the dark airplane needing to use the restroom, so I got out of my aisle seat, went to the lavatory, did my business, went back into the cabin and promptly passed out in my seat. Was awoken probably not long after to a flight attendant and some disgruntled passenger who'd lost their seat to a disoriented 10-year-old. I guess I just picked a random aisle seat and passed out. I was so young and it was so long ago that it hardly matters, but it was thoroughly embarrassing at the time. Story 25. Lots of alcohol and grass at a party at a friend's place. I remember at some point I told people I needed to sleep and went to an empty room. The last thing I remember is the girl coming to bed and we started discussing the world's problems. I don't remember any other thing. The weirdest part was in the morning. We woke up, awesome. I told her I don't remember anything from the night, not even her name. We had a proper introduction and had intimacy, again, because why not? Had breakfast outside, then shared a taxi home. We were living close and never saw each other again. I guess it felt weird for both of us. Story 26. Woke up in a couple's bed after a night of drinking inside a bar that also happened to be inside a hotel. I woke up to them doing a morning when the husband looked at me and asked if I was ready to help give her another round. There was a pack of rubbers, so I grabbed one, put one on, and gave her a good time as she was pretty hot. I remembered a bit about a group of people they were with, which turned out to be a party held at that hotel. Still had all my money, so they didn't rob me, and the couple invited me over a few more times. Good times. No longer drink. Story 27. The night before I graduated college, I was doing a case race with my roommates, girlfriend, and some friends. The girlfriend and I turned in pretty early. For that night anyway, around 3:30 a.m. I didn't finish the case, but came pretty close, so we were quite intoxicated. Anyway, we were intimate in my bed and fell asleep. A couple of hours later, I woke up and was spooning someone. This was not my girlfriend. Alarm bells started going off. My girlfriend was spooned behind me, and a strange girl, friend of a friend, was in front of me. All three of us were together. It seemed like a no-win situation for me. My girlfriend was definitely not the type who would go for something like that, but the friend of a friend apparently was, and besides, I know I would have remembered something like that if it actually happened. How did I respond to such a situation? Well, first I found my garments, then I got out of bed and went to my roommate Nick's bed and slept at the foot of it. I really didn't want to catch flack for this. The other girl was a little embarrassed, I think. She must have snuck out as soon as she woke up. My girlfriend somehow knew what happened, but she couldn't really get mad. I was blameless. I graduated, so I never saw the other girl again. Still Facebook friends, though. Story 28. Oh man, it's happened an embarrassing amount of times. Waking up after a night of drinking and my brain starts a reboot cycle that usually goes something like this. I'm conscious. Wait, where the heck am I? Crap. I appear to be in a state and there's someone else here. Crap, I am cold. Whoever this person is, they're a blanket hog. Okay, now I'm more conscious and I'm starting to realize I'm very uncomfortable. Crap, I need some water, some more sleep, and Jesus. Time to find my stuff. Super relieved, intoxicated me stuffed my wallet, glasses, and phone into one of my boots, riding off the loss. Stumble around the apartment looking for the bathroom while attempting to avoid roommates. Order an Uber as I sneak out the front door. Try piecing my night together on the ride home. Scratch my face at some point. What is that? Yep, that's been some places. Smell again because I'm a degenerate. Sun's coming up now. Wish it would take off. Gosh darn, I want to brush my teeth. Get home, drink an outrageous amount of water, take a shower, spend the rest of the day in bed thinking about my life choices, eat an edible before bed, have a small crisis, rinse, repeat. Story 29. I was working out west in the oil field. We lived at a man camp with about 10 or so identical mobile homes side by side. One Saturday night, the entire man camp got together for a jungle juice party, and literally every alcohol you could think of was dumped in this ginormous punch bowl. Mentally, the night ended quickly for me, but physically, I stayed up for several hours. I knew I wouldn't be able to make the 50-yard walk back to my trailer, so I decided to sleep in the front room of the trailer where the fire was. I figured my buddy wouldn't mind as he was out of state snowmobiling. There was only one issue. He'd moved to another friend's trailer in our camp just a few nights before. We moved around often if we got tired of each other, etc. I woke up in this ginormous bed with the son of another guy on the other end. He was legitimately like 100 pounds, so my intoxicated self probably thought he was a pillow. He basically threatened me. By the time I got my bearings, the story started coming in from everyone. My boss, who also happened to be a buddy from back home, told me if he didn't fire me, they were going to press charges. Made for a long 22-hour ride home. That was several years ago, and now everyone has moved home, and it's a popular joke at parties. Story 30. Got really intoxicated in Flagstaff, AZ, with some tender girls who ditched me. The last thing I remember is being super intoxicated and in and out of blacking out, asking people for a ride back to my house in Conwood, about 45 minutes away. I don't recall ever getting a ride from anyone, but I woke up in Cornville, a half hour from Flagstaff, about 15 minutes from my house, on a random bed in a trailer. The person wasn't in the bed with me. I was asleep on the hard linoleum floor, and all my things were nicely set up next to me. My purse was there with everything in it. The phone was plugged in for me, and I was physically unharmed. Being a small, vulnerable girl, I really wanted to wake him up and thank him, but he wouldn't budge at all. I ended up writing a note with my phone number in case he wanted me to send him a treat or something, and then I start walking. Luckily, an SOS on Facebook brought my friends running to my rescue, and I didn't have to walk all the way. I probably would have been in a bad situation, gotten dehydrated along an Arizona highway, but all's well that ends well. I don't drink anymore after that because I got so lucky, and I just don't think I'll ever get that lucky again if I keep blacking out like that. I waited for a mystery savior to text and ask for some kind of reward, but he never did. Thank you, random guy from Cornville. Thank you, random guy from Cornville. Story 31. When I was married to my ex-husband, he had some of his new grad school friends over to hang out. I went out that night before they came over. When I came home, they were all in the kitchen playing Never Have I Ever. I didn't want to disturb, so I went straight to bed and just texted my husband that I was home. The next morning, I rolled over to my husband and there was a dude I didn't know in my bed. Started screaming, obviously. He wakes up screaming. Husband runs in the room. It was like a movie scene. Turns out the guys were intoxicated quite a bit the night before. Friend Andrew asked to crash out of our place instead of driving home. They both remember that conversation, but neither of them ever could explain how Andrew ended up in the bed and my husband ended up on the couch. Story 32. I married him 6 years later. He's a wonderful person, and I feel very lucky to be with him. We partied together that night with a group of friends, and we were all pretty intoxicated. A bunch of us ended up back at his house. Right before I went inside, my toxic ex-boyfriend called me, and I'll tell you I would have answered his phone calls a million times in the past and dropped everything, but for whatever reason, I ignored his call and went inside to continue hanging out. A make-out turned into a night and a morning together, and as we eventually started to get to know each other, I fell pretty hard in love. We've been married for almost 3 years now. Story 33. I was 4 years old and deep in the phase where I'd wake up in the middle of the night and go into my parents' bed, sleep the rest of the night. My parents were hosting some of my grandparents' friends in their 60s who were visiting from overseas, and my 4-year-old brain reasoned that my parents would obviously cede their bed to this elderly couple and sleep on the sofa bed downstairs instead, which was somewhat lumpy. So when I woke up in the middle of the night and I went down the stairs, snuggled in between the man and woman in the bed, and promptly fell back asleep. I don't remember anything after that, but my mom said she was awoken the next morning by me screaming downstairs. Story 34. I went to a club show with a friend. He kept talking loud to me during the show, and a girl turned around and yelled at him for shouting during the music. Her and I both agreed he needed to shut up and ended up drinking heavily together. I left my friend and went back to her place. She insisted on making us some food to sober us up a bit, so she pulled out a rotisserie chicken and heated it up. She brought the chicken into her room, but we started making out right after. I woke up in her bed the next day and had no idea where I was. I was Jason Bourne for 5 minutes. The girl was nowhere to be found, and I struggled to put anything together. Then I glanced over to the bedside table and saw an untouched rotisserie chicken. I never saw her again. I don't remember her name. She's forever enshrined as Chicken Woman. Story 35. I was staying in Cusco, Peru, and I didn't take any oxygen supplement stuff to help me when I went to that high of an altitude. Other than a bit of shortness of breath, I didn't have any issues, though, which was shocking because I both smoked and drank pretty heavily at the time. Until I tried to sleep. I think falling asleep slowed my breathing and started depriving me of oxygen, which made my brain panic. Hard. Really hard. I was having intense nightmares back to back to back and could not wake up into reality. It was terrifying. At the time, I was staying in a 16-person room hostel, so I guess my distress was quite audible and people kind of got nervous. I remember waking up at one point with a girl holding my head and running her hands through my hair, and all I could ask was, "Am I still dreaming?" She laughed and gave me some water and fell asleep holding me. She also gave me some oxygen out of a small tank, which helped a lot. When I woke up in the morning, she was gone. But waking up out of that infinite nightmare and seeing her face and feeling her rubbing my head was like looking up at an angel. Maybe it was a dream. Story 36. Some years ago, as a happily married man, I had a whirlwind week of business travel that found me sleeping in a different hotel every night. At the end of the week, with my travel exhaustion at its peak, I woke up, not quite sure where I was. I rolled over and felt a woman next to me. I panicked for a moment and wondered, dear God, what have I done? I quickly realized that I was in my bed at home and the other person was my wife. My panic immediately turned to relief and I relaxed, grateful to be home. We both got a good laugh out of the experience. Of course, we are now divorced, but it had nothing to do with that trip. Sounds like something that someone who had a divorce involving a trip would say. Story 37. Went out with a friend on a random Saturday night. I was 16, she was about the same. I won't elaborate too much, but by that age I was a pretty heavy partier drinker. Well, this night began, as most good stories do, with us drinking Carlo Rossi in a graveyard. I had a blast. I vaguely remember meeting some Q boys and heading to their house. I very briefly remember trying tequila for the first time. After that, the night went black. I woke up in the loft bed next to a guy. I was fully dressed, so I was kind of confused. He was asleep, and I noticed my friend was also in the bed on the other side of him. She looked panicked. I picked up on her vibes and quietly helped her get dressed, and we got the heck out of there. My head was spinning with worst-case scenarios. I asked her, "Are you okay? Should we go to the hospital? The police? Did he hurt you?" Her answer, "Oh my god, no. I had fun, but I just realized that my cousin and my mom would end me if she found out." Story 38. I was a witness, but technically it was my boyfriend. My boyfriend and I were at my house, home from college. We went out, got very intoxicated, and passed out in my bed. In the middle of the night, I heard my parents scream laughing. It turned out my boyfriend got up to pee, walked into their room, and nestled between my parents. My boyfriend was only in his garments. My dad woke up and realized something was off. He tried to wake my boyfriend up, but couldn't, and he couldn't stop laughing. Finally, I heard the commotion and retrieved my boyfriend. The next morning, when he walked into breakfast, my parents started laughing uncontrollably again. My boyfriend had no recollection of the event. The best part of the story is that my mom was undergoing chemotherapy and radiation. She was a shadow of her former self. We hadn't heard her laugh in months. My dad and I were so happy that she was laughing that we just laughed even harder. My dad thanked my boyfriend the next morning for making her laugh. She recovered, and we still joke about the moment to this day. John, thanks for bringing light to my mom in a time of complete darkness. Why are you saying that like you broke up? Story 39. I put a stranger in my spare bed. One night out, and on the way home from a club, I recognized a girl sitting at the side of the road as an ex of a friend. My boyfriend and I stopped to talk to her. She was completely intoxicated, and we tried to get her into a taxi home, but she wouldn't go for it. When we asked her where she lived, all she would say was, 1 Nugget Lane, Nugget Town, laughing hysterically. All she wanted was chicken nuggets, apparently. So we walked her to McDonald's, got her some chicken nuggets, and then brought her home with us to sleep in her spare room. The look of relief on her face in the morning when I went in with a cup of tea was something else. I nearly cried. Had no idea where she was, but was so thankful to see a familiar face. This was a few years ago, and she's my best friend now. We call the spare room her room, and she has a full sleepover kit there because she sleeps over so often. She's my nugget queen. Aw, that's such a wholesome story. Story 40. I really wish I'd caught this earlier. I hope someone sees this because it's a good one. About 3 years ago, I went to visit my friend in New York City and stayed with him and his roommates at his place in Brooklyn. Q Night 3. I proceeded to get completely intoxicated. Doesn't happen to me very often, I swear. I woke up, no joke, as the third person spooning with a couple I had never seen before in my life. Turns out I had come home completely intoxicated, and instead of sleeping on my living room cot, I decided to go up to my friend's room to sleep. He's a close friend. In my intoxicated haze, I got the room wrong and crawled in with his roommate and her boyfriend, who I hadn't met yet, and snuggled right in. I woke up entirely confused and completely mortified. They were really nice about it, and probably tell the story as a funny anecdote at parties, but my goodness, was that horrible. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. Catch you in that video.